Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. This morning, state of Ghana's economy, ESA's verdict. They have very interesting points to raise about the economy, and we seek to interrogate them this morning. They say our debt situation is fast approaching unsustainable levels. Agricultural growth in 2018 declined despite expansion in the planting for food and jobs beneficiaries. Why is that so? They have issues to raise about the size of government and what they find to be sheer waste that needs to be dealt with. We'll also attempt to examine the cost, how the closure of Nigeria's border is hurting local business. Ghana has a delegation that is presently in Nigeria seeking to get some relief. Joy News is also around the borders. We'll bring you very deep insights as to what exactly is going on. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyenini. And after almost a month of a break for my take, today, here's my take, and I titled Samson's Take. This MMDC's votes, the $6 million CRC projects. July 2014, I wrote the article, CRC report, Cabinet's coup d'etat, CSO's gaffe, condemning the cherry-picking white paper, accepting some 90% of the CRC's recommendations for changes to the Constitution. I slammed government for subverting the collective will of the people with that illegal and unconstitutional white paper. That's how government lost popular support for the project. The CSOs got angry, and a suit at the Supreme Court would halt the implementation. And by the time the court gave the green light, elections came. President Mills set up the Eminent Commission in 2010, but the African Peer Review Mechanism had proposed the amendments exercise in 2005, with President Kufuor endorsing it a year later. Nana Akufo-Addo had also been speaking passionately about overhauling the 1992 Constitution. It is therefore strange that all that has happened over the period has been a small Attorney General's committee isolating less than a dozen of the 99 recommendations, tweaking them for piecemeal implementation, and doing so outside the broader CRC project, the voice of the people. This week, I joined Professors Audrey Gajepo, H. Kwesi Prempeh, Raymond Atuguba, Madam Clara Berry, and others to demand implementation of the over $6 million investment in a 1,000-page CRC report, arguably the biggest socio-political database Ghana ever had. The CRC, during a period of 2 years, held consultations in all 170 districts, held over 57 sessions, received over 83,000 submissions for transforming a political constitution to a developmental constitution. The citizens in whom sovereignty resides, springs, and on whose behalf all powers of government must be exercised, were unanimous in demanding a legally binding NDPC National Development Planning Policy. Government rejected this noble demand. Their demand for MMDCEs to be elected was varied, and it is now further diluted with a referendum in December to make what the Constitution, for very good reasons, commands must not be partisan, as if we haven't had enough of the unproductive, destructive, nation-wrecking partisanship. Citizens demanded MPs must not double as ministers. We have decided to not tie the president's hands to appointing majority of ministers from Parliament, but rather hand him the choice to pick ministers while making qualification to be MP the core eligibility criteria in this exercise. No interest is shown in the overwhelming demand to change the imperial president status by cutting some of his appointing powers, including for heads of all independent constitutional bodies. I invite citizens to join the CSO election community of practice and learning to push for quick and holistic implementation of the CRC report. That important and expensive document must not continue to gather dust. We collectively, unanimously acknowledge the problems of this constitution, including its creation of an imperial president who may have to invest his 4-year term executing the bizarre task of appointing all the thousands of office holders with liberty to saddle poor taxpayers of a country surviving on loans and aid with 112 ministers. That's by way of my take. It's on myjoyonline.com. Let me welcome my guests for this morning's discussion in two parts. We're looking at the status of the economy, the verdict of ISE. Are they right? Are they wrong? What lessons can we pick from there? And of course, they are looking to be able to shape and influence the budget of 2020. How will they be successful in doing that? And then the second segment, we are looking at the closure of the Nigerian border and how it's affecting even Nigerians seeking to do business and Ghanaians who are also seeking to do business. And in fact, Ghanaian traders are stranded, and government has a delegation that's been pushing since August to try and get them some help. How is that hurting local trade? My guests for the very first segment of this session, of this news file, you may want to call it economics file, are Abdul Malik Kwekuba, co-editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, Dr. Ebo Texan, senior lecturer and program coordinator, Economic Policy Management Program, Department of Economics of the University of Ghana. Kweku Kwating, his MP for Boise West and Deputy Minister of Finance. Also here in the studio is Seth Tekpe, former Minister of Finance. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning.
Great, great. Okay, so we will take a very quick break and return to hear my guests on the economy. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And let's begin by getting you to hear some of the views that ISE had to put out about the economy. And we had Dr. Charles Acker, Senior Research Fellow at ISE, speak. In fact, he led the delivery of that report for the consumption of all of us. So let's listen to Dr. Charles Acker, Senior Research Fellow at ISE.
How does government gain efficiency in spending? And I think it's time for us to have a national discussion about some of the government flagship programs. Given that we don't have the resources, we are missing all the revenue targets, we want to go beyond 8, and we are not able to raise enough tax revenue in this country. We need to discuss free SHS again. We need to discuss the issue of NAPCO, whether that is a sustainable way of creating jobs and all the people we put there and we are paying them. We need to discuss some of the ministries that we have set up to see whether they still need to exist. What is the Ministry for Inner City and Zongo Development? Is it really relevant? What are they doing? We need to have a discussion about the Ministry of Evaluation. Ministry of Evaluation. What are they evaluating? We need to have a discussion about the Ministry for Regional Reorganization and all the amount of money we are spending there. We need to discuss about the Ministry of Development. What are they developing? Can Ministry of Trade do the work that they are doing? We need to have a discussion about the Ministry of Transport, Railways, and Aviation. Do we need to have 3 different ministries, or can one ministry do aviation, transport, and railways? And we need to talk about the Ministry of Special Development Initiatives and all the 3 development authorities that have been put there. So no, we need to have a discussion about controlling expenditure and gaining efficiency in our expenditure.
Right. And we have the full presentation as done by Issa, and we'll be sharing some portions of it with you. Now, Issa has been doing this for many, many years, and this is the 24th of the Status of the Economy report that Issa is delivering, and it involves very important, eminent persons in the economic, particularly as far as academia is concerned, those people who are involved doing this job, and also having it being reviewed by very illustrious citizens who have expertise in this area. So I believe that there is no question when they deliver their report. We can listen also to President Akufo-Addo. He was at the Ghana Economic Summit, a very important high-level meeting annually done to also look at matters of the economy. And he had some views also about the economy and what his government particularly is doing to avoid waste and ensure that the proper measures are in place.
As you all know, the macroeconomic situation that my government inherited at the beginning of 2017 was a dire one. GDP growth at 3.6% at the end of 2016 was the lowest in over 2 decades. The 2016 fiscal deficit was 9.3%, and inflation at 15.4%. Our external reserves position at the end of 2016 was weak, i.e. 2.5 months import cover, despite having become an oil exporting country. The banking sector was weighed down by a plethora of poorly capitalized and weak and insolvent institutions, with potentially grave consequences for the entire financial system. Agricultural and industrial activities were down. Unemployment, especially of the youth, was widespread against a background of low incomes and high prices. This was the distressing state of the economy that awaited us in January 2017, despite an ongoing 3-year IMF extended credit facility arrangement that had been initiated in April 2015 with the previous government. Since 2017, we see an economy that has been growing consistently above 7%, and in the last 2 years has been among the world's fastest growing economies. Indeed, the IMF projects Ghana's economy this year to have one of the world's highest growth rates of 7.6%. Inflation for September stood at 7.6% in single digits, the lowest in over 2 decades. Our exports are growing healthily. Our trade balance, for the first time in more than a decade, recorded a surplus in 2017, maintained it in 2018, and we expect to maintain the surplus for this year as well. We've brought the fiscal deficit down to 4.5%. Our external reserves as of June 2019 stood at 4.3 months of import cover. All our macroeconomic indices are pointing in the right direction. And it comes as no surprise, therefore, that today, Ghana is the leading recipient of foreign direct investment in West Africa.
And that's President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. And so let's begin from the University of Ghana, where we find Ise. You had a lot of positive things to say about the economy, but beyond that, you also seem to have a diagnosis that suggests that if things are not, done correctly, then we may be getting into trouble. People are happy about free SHS. You say free SHS is affecting private SHSs and is threatening jobs. I don't understand that. You also say, ask questions, how many jobs have been created as a result of the growth, especially the 1D, 1F. So there's been some growth, but how many jobs? You have, questions about rice import, which ranks, sixth. Agricultural growth, you say declined in 2018, and people are surprised to hear that because we are aware of the planting for food and jobs, which the Minister of Agriculture has been touting, and recently has made comments that people find a bit, not too much in good taste. You say that has declined. The agricultural growth has declined despite the expansion in the beneficiaries of that project. Commodity price fluctuations also have repercussions on our economy, and that is happening. You look at the banks that are become cautious to lend to agriculture and construction, due to what you say is the IFRS 9 repercussions, among others. So help us understand and bring it down to everybody. This morning I can assure you one thing: if you entered any home in Tamale, they'll be watching Newsfile. I was there this week, and the love was huge because of Newsfile. And thank you very much for what I'm wearing. That was given to me in Tamale this week by the students of UDS at Nyampala. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Something. I'm not a researcher at the Institute of Statistical and Economic Research. I'm from the Department of Economics, but I also contribute to the review of that document, and I totally accept the findings from the review of our economy. Now, the basis of the analysis was that, ever since we started this IMF program, our growth has picked up, which is a good sign. From 2.2 in 2015, we hit 8.1 in 2017, 6.3 in 2018, and we are targeting 7.6 this year, which is a good sign. From all indications, our macro indicators are showing an economy that is doing well. We hope that we consolidate those gains. But then if you look at the micro analysis of the economy, there are certain areas that we still need to pay attention to. Because they are very important, and if you look at the reports that was presented, that's what my colleagues did exactly, to caution government on certain aspects of the economy that they think that government should take a look at. One, over the years, our tax revenues have declined. Of course, maybe in 2017, because of those nuisance taxes that the MPP government removed, partly explains why it's declined.
Right, you captured that in the report.
Yeah, but most importantly, we are failing to meet our targets for the years. And therefore, if we want to keep to the fiscal deficit that we've planned for the economy, then we should look at the other side if we are not raising enough revenues. And that is why the presenter, Dr. Akab, mentioned that the government should look at prioritizing its expenditure to make sure that we are very efficient. And brought up the situation of the free SHS. That is a very good policy. It's one of the best policies that we need in this part of the world, because the only way we can expand our productive base and then move our economy forward is to have a highly skilled labor force. And there's no doubt about that. So we all think that the free SHS is a good policy. For us, it's the financing of the program that we think that there should be a second look at it. I have never been in favor of an indiscriminate subsidy. You provide subsidies because some people need help. And so you target them and give them a subsidy. But if you make it indiscriminate, then the economic and opinions of the subsidy is lost. Because, I mean, if I can take my kids to private schools at the basic level and pay thousands of Ghana cedis, I don't really need support at the SHS. We should rather think that the government should be looking at those who really need that support so that it will free us from the huge amount of resources that we commit to providing subsidies for everyone. I mean, we make arguments about issues about equity, but how equitable is that free SHS? Because those who never get to go to the public schools, who go to the private schools, never get that subsidy. And they are also entitled to it. So in our estimation, what we think is that if we take a second look at the funding for the free SHS, for instance, it will be possible to even extend the subsidies to those who go to the private schools and who need help. And so then it becomes possible for the private schools to take up part of those who are overcrowding our private schools, and we are running a double track system. I must admit that government is doing a lot to try to expand the infrastructure. Maybe in a few years to come, we'll shed off this double track system. But currently, with the enormous amount of resources that are coming into the free SHS, it is having an impact on our capital expenditures. And our economy needs to invest in infrastructure. It needs to expand the productive base so that we can generate employment and then collect more taxes.
Which we haven't done, really.
Precisely. So the issues that we are raising in that report is just to let the Ghana government be aware that these are critical areas that we need to take a look at. We are not saying that those flagship programs are not necessary, but do we have the resources to fund them? And even if we want to do them, we should be very efficient at doing them. We should reduce the waste in the system. NABCO, for instance, we do not have an exit plan. So yes, you get these young men and women job for 3 years. What happens after 3 years? Do you have a plan in place for them? So, I mean, the conclusion from the report is that the outlook is promising for 2019, but there are critical areas that are posing challenges for us, and we think that the government should take a look at it. So really, the conclusion from that was to highlight a few things that we think the government should take a look at as it prepares to present.
Your concern about NABCO, I don't exactly understand what you guys were getting at with the NABCO scenario. Well, when you mentioned, isolated some of the ministries, you spoke about the large size of government, the Obolo government. Everybody admits that. Pretty much this is unjustifiable, except people in government who say it's justified to have over 100 ministers in, a debt reading. And you say that our debt is fast approaching unsustainable levels. So we can't survive if we don't borrow, if we don't get aid, and yet we can afford such, a balloon size of government. You have problems with that. You say one of the quick ways to shed off that load is throw away some of the unnecessary ministries. Evaluation ministry, monitoring, you say it doesn't have a business doing. You say the reorganization minister has finished his job, so he should pack and get out. But the NABCO one, I don't understand what you mean by that.
I mean, what we mean is we have provided temporary jobs to these young men and women who would have completed their national service and have been home looking for jobs. But it's supposed to be a 3-year, so we're on the program for 3 years. The point is that what happens after 3 years if they've not gotten jobs? So we need to expand our productive base. And if we do that, these young men and women will get jobs after their national service. And we don't need an NABCO to do anything. I mean, we understand that
people who are in NABCO,
yes,
who left university, and for upwards of 5 years, 6 years, they didn't have a job. For them, this is salvation come to them. And they have 3 years of an opportunity to put themselves in a position where they are more likely to find a job. You are saying this should be scrapped, really?
We are not saying it should be scrapped. We are saying that, I mean, we do not have an exit plan for them, 1. 2, I mean, as I'm home for a long time, I'm looking for a job. You give me a job. 1, what type of jobs are we giving them? How much are we paying them? Now, so at the end of the 3rd year, when it's done, I go back home. If the economy has not expanded to create jobs for me, I'm going to go back to the situation I was before I entered. And then there are still no jobs.
You go back home having had 3 years of some experience that you may be able to even create some job for yourself.
Yeah, so why wouldn't we rather retool them if we think that they are not capable of creating jobs for themselves, rather than give them these jobs like fine, I mean, some of them are very important, like for the Ghana Revenue Agency,
right.
If it's possible for us to get them to go and value property so that we can look at property rates and stuff like that. So we are not saying that the whole program is bad. We are saying that it is having a toll on our expenditures. And because we are not collecting enough revenue, it tends to limit the fiscal space that we need, especially to invest in capital infrastructure. And it's important that we take a look at this, because the only way in which we can move our economy to the next level is to invest in sectors that are labor intensive, that allow us to add value to the agricultural produce that we are endowed to produce. And that is the only way, because agro-processing now is one of the main areas in sub-Saharan Africa that is going to drive our growth.
Right.
And we need to invest in agro-processing. So not until we begin to make enough investment, capital investment in infrastructure to generate the necessary employment in the industrial sector, especially in agro-processing, these short-term gap measures would not really have the desired impact.
And you correctly attribute the slow growth within the period you examined to certain global, circumstances as well, and then also the, rate of unemployment. Also, you have reasons external to attribute some of that too. But what are the implications of this? You say fiscal outlook remains promising, but public debt is fast approaching unsustainable levels. And when I say you, please don't misunderstand me. The way they generate this economic status at ISE is that almost all the departments that have something to do with the economy are involved and they contribute to it. So he may not be from ISE, but once he's over there and has belongs to one of these departments, he will have an input, and he admits that. You say that the public debt stock in 2018 was 173 million plus. It was Ghana cedis. It was 70% and 58% of GDP in 2017 and 2018 respectively, and currently around 59.4% of GDP. Domestic debt accounted for 50.2%, while external debt was 49.9%. Interest payments accounted for 27.2% of total expenditure and 5.3% of GDP. High interest payment limits the fiscal space, thereby affecting development. That's where you came to make this statement, that outlook for 2019 looks promising, though significant challenges remain. Significant amount of capital spending have been sacrificed. It is important that some fiscal space is created for capital spending. So what do you mean, and what are the implications when you say the public debt is fast approaching unsustainable levels?
Thank you, Samson. As we speak, our debt service to domestic revenue has hit almost 45%, and which means that the domestic revenues that we collect, close to, you're almost hitting 50%. Half of it is going to pay to service the debt. What is left of the domestic revenue? How much is going to go to other government expenditures, and then especially to capital expenditure? So, I mean, when you say it's getting to unsustainable levels, we mean that the interest payment alone, the debt service alone on our loans are taking up everything that we raise from our domestic sources. As a percentage of our exports, it's about 25%. So quite clearly, we are moving at levels that will get to a time when almost all the domestic revenue that we collect we use to service our debts. And that is not an economy that you are looking at creating jobs.
You don't exactly say that, perhaps just to avoid being labeled as alarmist, but this is dangerous.
Yes, and that is the truth. I mean, so we need to do something about it. It's important that we look at ways in which we raise domestic revenue in this economy. I mean, if you look at the domestic revenue shares, I mean, self-employment is contributing next to nothing. I mean, how do we get people to pay taxes? How do we ensure that people comply with paying taxes? I mean, we have tried to come up with this tax identification numbers, but
Right.
I mean, when you are going for government service, all you need to do is to indicate that you have a tax identification number. You don't even show if you've paid your taxes. And we should move to the next level, where if I need a passport,
If you're bidding for a contract,
Yes.
you say service.
a service, government service.
Okay.
I mean, going for a passport, you're roadworthy. You should be able to show that you have filed your taxes, not just flashing the identification number. Because if you have it and you don't pay taxes, I mean, just processing the number is not enough. So we need to get hard at trying to raise enough revenue, so that then, if we want to fund some of these flagship
But these
programs,
businesses, if they want jobs from the public sector, they want contracts from the government, then you'll admit that they need to show that they are tax compliant, they are fully paid up, otherwise they don't get any jobs.
Sure,
And
I
that
mean,
is good.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good sign. I mean, but there's still a lot for us to do. I mean,
Okay.
there are people who own properties in this country that pay next to nothing for those properties.
Right about
When
that.
we undervalue the properties, at times you get a sense that because those of us in positions to make decisions are directly going to be affected by that because we own properties. There is this lax on the part of government over the years to look at property taxes, because it's critical. We need to chase property owners to pay taxes.
We have said for as long as I became, politically aware, that our, property rates are ridiculously low. They are insignificant. And yet, I can assure that once the managers of the economy try to touch it, will be the same people who complain. But let's hear some summary of a perspective from Mrs. Tepe, former Finance Minister, of the report by ISE.
Well, thank you very much. Government will take the lead, but it's fine. Well, I think I must, commend ISA for consistency. Over the years, I believe this is the 27th or
this 24th
report, and I mean, so this analytical consistency, which is a consistent way of comparing government performance, and so it has gone through the years, and I think if we continue with the objectivity, that comes from the report, and that's very important, then it should be acceptable, as a basis for analysis, including the middle class, this country. Let me touch on a couple of issues. He said there's something very interesting. It goes to, if you go to the PowerPoint at page 6, they go back to 2010 and they show, the performance of advanced countries, middle income countries, and the growth pattern. And you see that for all of them, there was a serious dip significantly between 2014 and 2016. And you will know where I'm coming from. And so if, fast forward, you are drawing attention to global developments as a reason, for the deceleration of the economy, we have always been making this point. That one of the things for which we are proud is that within the period I'm referring to, many sub-Saharan African countries with stronger capacity than Ghana went into recession. And Ghana never went into recession. And I think it is important, therefore, this is very important, because then we would be able, because another recession is being predicted. We are hoping we can avoid it, right? Then we would avoid the economy being evaluated only on account of non-performance by its managers. We would know that there are external factors.
Okay.
And we would also see the importance of the PRM in particular, and the need for the stabilization fund. And I would wish that ISA will begin to look at some of these policy initiatives, because we used it in 2015 for the first time as buffer, when it was going down. We used a sinking fund to actually pay off, the $550 million US out of the $750 million US. our own oil revenues to pay off the first sovereign bond, which would have been a problem in 2017. We did investments using the ABFA, which is going into, I think the issue at stake is whether, the portion of the budget we should be using our resources into consumption. We are missing a word instead of, development. And the investments that we did in infrastructure, is obvious. In other words, we were following the 2015 budget theme of rebalancing the budget. Because recall that single spine was taking, we are lamenting interest payments. And the NAPCO contest also comes in. At the point we were using 70%, of tax revenue, which is the highest of the domestic revenue, in paying, just wages because of the single spine, which was worthwhile. The thing about this is that they are worthwhile, right? Because you need to motivate the public sector. Now, the other point I'd like to make is therefore that coming from that situation where we avoided as a nation, and let me not be partisan at this because everybody contributed, avoided recession and managed to invest, in 2 additional oil fields, which is what provided a fillip for the 2017. You will see that even in 2017, non-oil sector was not growing, which is a carryover from the power crisis, and from the depression in commodity prices, which, but nonetheless, GDP as a whole grew, right? Now the question is, if this is the result of performance, right, by an incoming administration, why is it not being sustained? And why is it, beginning to go down? And that is one factor which I would hope we would, discuss. But we have been through this before. In fact, if you go to ISA's graph, again, and I think this is on page 10, you will see that the highest spike in growth for the decade or so that they are showing occurred in 2011-2012, Jubilee, with oil again being the main factor, and then it tapered. So there should have been a certain tampering, given the global crisis, and they mentioned China, leading again. Remember, it was China's demand that fell in 2014 to 2016, that brought sub-Saharan Africa down. And some economies, strong economies in South Africa and the rest, are still struggling. Nigeria is just emerging out of it, Angola. So we are not an island. But I'm saying that there would have been some tampering of the bullishness, about performance. And the reality that the global economy was softening. To his credit, the Minister for Finance mentioned it, in last year's budget, the impact of the Fed interest rates, and other factors. In short, what I'm saying is that there is a context, to performance, which is not always on account. Otherwise, as I said, we should be evaluating the government on account of 3 oil fields versus 1, right? And rarely so because crude oil prices have rebounded from low 40s to average mid-60s. Crude oil output has rebounded thanks to 10 fields and Sankofa. And whatever may have happened to the turret bearing, from around 70,000 barrels per day, today we are close to 200,000 barrels per day. Right? And so what is it that is happening, to the softening? On our own, with this, we should have, yes, I accept that, the response, it is outward looking, right? But there is an aspect of it that is internal, that is internal growth.
Maybe just a couple of the points that they mentioned. Their commentary, for example, an assessment of the free SHS and the impact it has, in fact, threatening jobs. And I think that is, for me, is the highlight. You are on record to have said that whilst it is popular it is unsustainable.
Fiscally unsustainable.
Fiscally unsustainable. And let me correct myself. Earlier I said this is the 24th. They started this in 1990. So this will be the 28th.
Okay.
The publication of the State of the Ghanaian Economy report. So why do you say it's unsustainable, and what ought to be done? Because this report is released at this time to seek to influence the 2020 budget.
Well, my view is what informed Progressively Free to take the infrastructure first to the districts, to the communities, and progressively promote day school. Day schooling, which is what even the advanced countries do, with Basel, at middle school and secondary school level. And even in many advanced countries, even university college, it's also day school. There's a de-emphasis on the heavy aspects of boarding and the rest. And we would have thought, that is, where we should be going. That is again because, as I said, we were coming out of close to a recession, right? And we analyzed the situation that it would take time for the economy to pick. And remember also that we had our domestic issues. The non-flow of gas, from Nigeria, which affected power and affected production in the economy. Recall that factories were operating at half strength, and all that, which led to the emergency power and the real sector, and I would have wished that the report dealt, a bit more into the value chain for the, energy sector, which was one of the things. So you were going to, gradually replace some of this lost space. And therefore another heavy expenditure in the nature of single spine was going to lead to the crowding out. What we are talking about is that it is crowding out as it did, single spine did, and then luckily we had ABFA, which came to the rescue in terms of, which we channeled towards capital development. It was going to crowd out, capital expenditure. So that is where the caution, the emphasis is on fiscally unsustainable. And even in the long to medium term, I doubt if it's fiscally sustainable unless there's a cost, unless we all agree as a nation, which is why the call from my former boss in terms of a forum to discuss these things, which is being repeated. Unless, of course, we want to accept the sacrifice. Because some of the problems you are seeing, in terms of the lack of continuation of development projects, the lack of some of the problems with drainage and with other things, we were gradually beginning to move, resources, particularly the oil resources, into development expenditure, because that is development expenditure. You would agree with me that in 2017, much of the oil revenue went into, following the reprioritization, it went into education, and it went into recurrent education, which is where the support.
On the back of what Issa is saying, are you predicting a reversal from the current approach to providing free education to the model that the NDC, had begun with, even if the NDC does not win power in 2020?
Well, I think it's inevitable, but we're going to win power. I think it's inevitable in the sense that there's another aspect I believe I heard which was mentioned. And Issa could have done a pilot in University of Ghana to tell us the preparedness of University of Ghana to take the third batch that are going to go into tertiary, which is going to increase. So, unless, of course, we are going to say the end of the road.
It's inevitable that there will be a tweaking of this approach. How exactly, what are you looking at? That it will not be
we are looking,
free for all, non-discriminatory?
Well, I've come from the past, and we are looking at, the going forward. I think it's a bit early for me. I have some ideas, and the reason is simple, we have now come to the full 3-year, 3-year cycle. Remember, year 1 of free SHS.
You want to preserve your idea for the manifesto? Is that what you're seeking to do?
No, I'm giving you the reason.
This is service to this country.
No, it's service.
Right.
I've made my contribution, and I said it's inevitable.
We're expecting a budget in 2020.
No, I like to talk technically. And so, and I'm saying that there are things I don't know yet. Because we have year 1, parents paid year 2 and 3. Year 2 of free SHS, parents paid year 3. Year 3 of free SHS, which is September, and we are just in November. You see my reason for caution. You have the full cost now being offloaded to the budget. And then come next year, the first batch of free SHS are going to tertiary. And what is the implication for tertiary? Unless we are saying that, okay, you end with free SHS and for the majority, and that is it. Right, and this is where doing things progressively and taking care. And this is where the emphasis on infrastructure, comes in. Okay. So that is my point on, but let me touch on a couple of things.
And do that very briefly, take a pause and let me hear from Kuku Kwating.
There is a contradiction in saying that we are doing fiscal consolidation. I would say unprecedented if I go with the numbers. Remember 10.3% down to 4. That's 6 percentage points of consolidation. Consolidation means revenue minus expenditure, and your deficit is going down. So why are you borrowing? And why is debt going up? Because borrowing and debt finances the deficit. And we have pointed to 3 things. Let me be quick. I've said it here, in the previous. First, there is an offset that is going on, which we have been drawing attention to. And again, I would have wished that ISA interrogated it for whatever it is. Right? Second, there is a below-the-line treatment of costs like the fiscal cost, of the financial sector cost, which is in memoranda. And therefore, if you are taking just a headline above the line and telling us that you are consolidating, and we did our computation, and after you have added, the cost of the financial sector restructuring, and we hear people saying that it's exceptional. Of course, it's as exceptional as divestiture, and it's as exceptional as single spine, and it's as exceptional as subsidy. And governments in our fiscal framework have consistently treated it as exceptional, but above the line. So we think that the deficit is somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5% if you were to add all of this and to follow the consistency with which we treat this thing. And so I like ISA to look at that contradiction. Fiscal economies where you are consolidating, you are showing impressive headlines, but you are also borrowing.
Okay.
My quick point. You are borrowing to the point where the 2016 end debt to GDP ratio that was berated has now been exceeded. It was exceeded at the end of 2018. Okay. And it's going. The rate of decline, which started with the single file and the rest, is going up. And that is in the budget. It's the debt management report.
Right. So on the note that Mr. Tepe ends, Mr. Kuku Kwating, now you must have a very difficult job at the Finance Ministry. But here, the debt is fast becoming unsustainable. The question people relate to that is, so we are borrowing so much, but what is the evidence or the benefit of the borrowing? How can you explain that to them? But ISA points you to something too, the fiscal sector. They say that tax exemptions are too high, estimated at 4.2 billion cedis. How much progress have we made in reducing this? They are asking for rationalization of the tax exemption regime and for you to also make information public. They say between 2013 and 2015, numerous import exemptions meant the share of import duties fell from between 49.8% in 2012 to 55.9% by 2015. Import exemptions from international trade fell to 24.8% and 19.2% of total revenue in 2016 and 2017 respectively. In 2018, as exemptions on imports increased to 33.6% of total revenue from international trade, 2.047 billion out of 6.102 billion realized from international trade taxes.
Well, thank you, and good morning to viewers and listeners. Samson, I begin by making the point that when you sit at the Ministry of Finance and you see the pressures on the national purse, you kind of lose your appetite for partisanship. you lose your appetite for partisanship, and over the years, we are all now beginning to learn to tackle the problems frontally. After all, we are the same Ghanaians,
right?
And therefore, coming to this program, I committed that we will keep to the issues and see what it is that we can do to improve the lives of our people. But given the context that Honorable Tekpe has attempted to set completely wrong, it's important that we correct that in order that we can make proper progress. Look, in 2011, as a result of oil, as Honorable Tekpe pointed out, we did 14% real GDP growth. Consistently, by the close of 2016, that had lowered to 3.6. Whether Africa, there was recession elsewhere, if you look at the consistent deterioration, by 2016, it leaves you in no doubt that there was something wrong with those strategies. 2, in 2014, Honorable Tekpe came to the ministry, to the Finance Committee, of which I was a member, and I remember putting this question to him then, that do you intend to go for an IMF program? And his answer was that as a country, we can't do that. We cannot always go for an IMF program, we come back, we misbehave, and we have to go back. So at this point, government has no intention of doing so. In 2015, and you remember it was in that 2014 that those homegrown policies were brought to Parliament. Whatever those homegrown policies did to us, by 2015, government said, in order to get policy credibility, that when we say things, people will trust us. When investors are coming out, they will trust our policies. We need to go for an IMF program. In fact, when we came into office at the beginning of 2017, the state of the economy, before we went for the IMF, had deteriorated. And therefore, we needed to stay on a little bit in order to exit in a way that would not give people in the market a wrong impression about the economy. So it is clear that the economic strategies by the Mama administration were wrong. The outcomes were regrettable. And let's not make any attempt to direct anybody to go back to those strategies. They were just wrong. We just will not go there.
Okay.
But on the broader discussion about what ISE has put out, I have to say that I have gone through the summaries of the report. I have not been able to read the report itself. And overall, they make points that, in my respectful view, are worth government's attention. Right. They make some very legitimate points, and I'll touch on some of them briefly. Some of them...
I was speaking with Mr. Tekpe before we even started the show, and he was full of commendation for some of the work they have done, and that it's positive. But you come to the main issue. I'll quickly
pick. I'm coming. Because several points have been made, and I want to touch on them quickly.
Okay.
If you permit.
Right. That's okay. Go ahead.
So I said and especially to come to a conclusion that the outlook looks good. I mean, for government, we're definitely not going to agree with you, given what we're seeing. It only tells us that the strategies are right, and that we should deepen them. And of course, taking into account some of the cautions that they also put across. That is how we build an economy. Now, if you listen to the report, I'm sure and as you would have heard from our Minister for Information, we disagree with some aspects of the conclusions they came to. And if you permit me to touch on, expenditures, they may be big, they may be small, they are choices. In the end, you are giving political power to deliver improvements to the life of the people, and you have to make those expenditure choices that would make this happen. And of course, I agree. You do that within your means. You do that without hurting the economy. But we consider that our choice of expenditure mix is right. We will continue to review many of these strategies. Within government itself, there's conversation going on. And for me, sitting in the Ministry of Finance, any discussion that says any kind of expenditure will be reduced is music in my ears. Because in the end, the burden comes to us, and we should produce the money. So, especially the conversation going on about free SHS. I couldn't disagree with the suggestion that if people can afford, allow them to pay. And I'm very happy to agree with you where you're right.
This is a view his minister had expressed long before.
Had expressed that view. But you should be fair to government. That's okay. I welcomed it. If you look at the policy, we have done the 2 years. We are even now moving on to do the policy fully. It is early days yet. As far as government is concerned today, that is a heritage for the Ghanaian child. It's a heritage for the Ghanaian child. So whilst we take into account the comments being made, we also are committed to ensuring that the policy as it is now is fully implemented. And I can say, because I just came from a retreat for this program, and we are discussing the budget, and I can assure the people of this country that in the 2020 budget, we have fully provided for the full scope of the free SHS. So as the conversation goes on, we would listen, we will see where changes are necessary, and if we are minded to make changes, we would make those changes. But for now, that is the policy.
Issa is pointing out to you that it's threatening jobs. Mr. Tetekpe is joining many others to say it's unsustainable. And that's when you look in the crystal ball, you can see that this is what it is.
I'm sure if it is, government will do the review, come to that conclusion, and will make the necessary adjustments. We do not, in fact, I personally, I like this discussion because we committed to do this for Ghanaians. We have shown commitment to our promise. We have delivered. We should collectively have a discussion. And if we come to the conclusion that, yes, we know you mean well, we know you care, but in view of its effect on the fiscal, we think we must tweak it a little bit. This country is for Ghanaians. Why should we say no?
What do you say to the ordinary Ghanaian who is looking at the global picture in this conversation and says, just a while ago you were saying the situation that the NDC regime had put the economy largely too much borrowing. You came in, and is the situation not worse? Was that your promise? And what are you doing with the borrowing? What are the benefits? Who can see the dividends of all of that?
I'll move on to that briefly. But you see, on NAPCO, very important points were made in respect of NAPCO. Look, this government, our strategy for the creation of jobs is to empower the private sector, let them create the jobs. Those are the really sustainable jobs. It is very clear to us. However, when you have a high unemployment situation, government must be seen to be doing something as the private sector picks up to take up this role. So our first objective in deploying NAPCO was to say, whilst you look for your job in the private sector, that is where you should really be looking for the job. Whilst you do that, government provides a certain relief. Look, there's nothing more disheartening. And as an MP, I have gone to homes, and parents have paid the school fees of their children. They have completed university, 3 years they are sitting at home, and the parents are almost in tears. Governance is about making people happy and responding to people's concerns. So what government said was, we will do this in the interim, whilst we provide the kind of support we can to the private sector, so that they will take their rightful role of providing jobs. So NAPCO did that. Second, NAPCO also did what Samson, you rightly indicated, to create a pool from which employers can employ. If you complete school, you sit at home for 3 years, you do not have a job, you become rusty. employers are worried, they do not know whether you can even fit in the job environment. By creating NAPCO and giving people the opportunity to be out there working, however small the stipend will be, it gives the employer some assurance, at least that this gentleman or this lady has been working here over this period. So it was also to prepare our graduates for the job market. And I think so far, the impact has been good. We are sensitive to concerns being raised about its effect. We will continue to review. This government, we do not feel that we know it all. We are listening, and if we come to agree that, again, NAPCO has to be tweaked in a certain way, we are happy to do that. Now, let me come to what I'm sure it's most important. And in dealing with the debt, we pick the revenue. The revenue remarks made by are legitimate. Again, I'm the Deputy Minister in charge of revenue. We all have concerns. We have to say that revenue performance over, say, the last 10 years has not been good. If you compare our economy with our revenue mobilization with our peers, you get a sense that we could do better. And
yeah, because people have questions. They've been asking, where are the roads? Where are the hospitals? Exactly. We are looking for all of these.
Not just that. Yes, that is, of course, that is a good point. But also, you look at similar economies and how much revenue they're generating. We are in no doubt that Ghana's revenue mobilization efforts should yield better outcomes. Now, it is a reason we're doing the revenue reforms. You might have heard the reforms going on in GRA. The idea is to make GRA a modern institution that will be respected, that will have the authority, that you would hear their name, and as it is in developed societies, you are more afraid of the tax authority than you are of the police. To create a customer-friendly GRA. That is why we're seeing the kind of reorganization we're seeing in GRA. But also, we're focusing a lot on automation, because ultimately, in order that the taxpayers would know that the information is known, that the revenue officer coming to you is unable to change anything for under whatever influence, because the data is on the system, and at any point you could audit it. That is what would make compliance higher. So we're looking at automation in many areas. I do not have the time to go into the details. Property rates. We're going to deploy, already we're doing the piloting. Before we're doing 2 different pilots, testing 2 different arrangements of using an automated arrangement to do the valuation of property, to do the billing, and also to do the payment. And it is also good for those of us at the center of government treasury, so that we can look across local government and to see which local government authorities do not need additional resources from the center. So resources will be freed for other government programs. So we're doing that, and I'm confident that, again, our efforts in automation will yield the outcomes we want. Finally, that's something. If you look at the debt, our debt, public debt right now, and you compare that with, and you relate that also to the interest payments, nobody would be happy about that. I am not happy. In the Ministry of Finance in government, we're not happy about that. Indeed, it has been characteristic of our economy that, as Honorable Tekpe said in many of his budgets, that when you have paid wages, when you have made interest payments and made statutory payments, there's nothing left. So the way you have had to survive then is to borrow. Now, that is, I agree, that is unsustainable. And therefore, the suggestion by observers that government has to be mindful of the rate at which it is borrowing, it's a legitimate one. We would look at it. But it is also important to indicate that debt accumulation, the rate of debt accumulation has improved. And that has happened because, you know, some of the debt instruments we took under the previous administration, and I remember when Tekpe coming to Parliament to inform us that they had contracted Eurobond of 10.75%. And I remember shouting almost in the committee room that, how could you do that? Now, but I sympathize with the government then, because at the time the fundamentals were quite weak, and therefore if our credit rating was lower and worse than it is now. And therefore, if you needed the money and you needed to borrow, you were bound to borrow at whatever rate your lenders would afford you. Now, as the fundamentals have improved and our credit rating has improved by all the credit raters, and therefore we are leveraging on that to borrow, to retire some of the more expensive instruments that we have on our books. And I think that is what has contributed to the improved rate of debt accumulation. But I totally agree that our debt should be lower, and it is the reason we are intensifying domestic revenue mobilization so that going forward, we will not have to borrow as much as we do now. But I conclude on this point, Samson, that the ISA report, for me, makes the important point that is most important for those of us in economic policy management, that the path is right, the outlook is good, but look at these. And then finally, something, you know, and on a lighter note, our former president, Mama, said, oh, he did it. He said it was under the administration. I don't want to pick any bones with him on that. What that tells us is that the path is the right one. Let's continue to support ourselves, deepen it, and ultimately Ghana will be the beneficiary.
Interesting. Two quick clarifications in 2 minutes. Then I like to hear Kweku, and normally when we have your caliber on the program, he will say, it's okay, let him speak, I don't want to say anything. But we had discussions earlier, and people want to hear what you have to say sitting where you sit, because we do not have that benefit listening to this, you know, technical people. Yes, so quickly, 2 minutes.
Senior brothers, middle class review of
middle class review
of policy.
Okay, yes.
Well, let me just
say quick. Yes. Yeah.
We attempted to do a homegrown policy, like Kenya and other countries, but not to exit, but to do it in the context, if you remember, we said of the policy support instrument, because you can't exit IMF. As we find out, Article 4 has implications for you. So what we wanted to do was to have our own program, put it within the PSI, as they call it, and the Article 4, and then progressively, like the other middle-income countries have done, when your buffers, like the stabilization fund and others, are working, and you can manage, you know, your budget and your debt, then you don't exit, but you know it becomes irrelevant. You know, that they come and be imposing. You know, so I think that was the context. Of course, the reality. No, of course, reality. When you are managing the economy, you have to be pragmatic, right?
Pragmatic that things are wrong.
Let me give you the reason. The reason was that, you know, just as we are beginning to experience, a lot of budget support was being withdrawn. 2, we had entered into the shortage of gas. We were in it actually. Remember, from 2012, it started from, and it was hurting, you know, the economy. And you needed a World Bank which has to tie in into your infrastructure and to resolve, which ultimately gave us a partial risk guarantee and other things. So we don't have any regrets.
I see.
So it was a pragmatic move that you needed
to Thank you. Yes. But there is this other aspect which, you know, in sections of the news seems to dominate part of the discussion about the size of governments and what they find to be wastes. What do you say? Well, what do you need the Ministry of Monitoring? What do you need the reorganization for? We have finished, you know, creating the regions.
Yes, at the budget hearings, this discussion about the Ministry for reorganization, regional reorganization came up, and the explanation, which we consider to be legitimate, that the main assignment has been completed. But many of these new regions are baby regions. And it is important that as they set up their institutions, this mother ministry is there to support them. I'm confident the president himself is reviewing the situation, and when he's convinced, when he's convinced, I'm confident he will make the necessary.
The sector ministry, but local government is still there.
The question is whether we have performed any better with the size that we had.
Well,
that's the genuine.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to go to that.
We had a certain size.
Sorry.
Yeah,
thank you.
So in response to you, the president, I am sure himself is listening to the comments that his government is too large. For some of them, the explanation has come to me. I think they are legitimate explanations. For instance, if you set up a ministry, they start to supervise an exercise of creating new regions. They have completed those regions, I think, must be helped to develop on those things on which they would be weak.
Okay.
And so you may need it, but I don't think they would have to be there forever. As and when they have completed all that they could do, that would happen. But the answer really is in what Honorable Tekpe has just said. It is the outcomes. You think it's for nothing that going into IMF, we inherited it, the economy had worsened. We have now been able to bring ourselves out. We're deploying all these social programs at a time the economy was in an IMF program because we had made electoral commitments and we wanted to be true to our commitments. We have done all we can to ensure that we keep these programs on course. If you are asking about what the evidence of Nanado's sense of the size of a government that is good is what we are seeing.
Okay.
And I conclude that, of course, we should continue to review and to bring rationalization wherever necessary. But the outcomes have been good.
Let's hear from Kuku. And Kuku, he says the president is listening, he listens, and I know he listens to this show too. But he's listening, but he's not listening to the overwhelming cries to cut down on this size of government. Because you yourself, you have been against this huge size of government.
Yeah, I'll come to that. But first, let me make a point clear. Indeed, I had a certain debate with the production team, the producer, and I thought I didn't have the requisite competence and knowledge level.
Too often you do that and they insist you should be in.
To participate in this particular edition. And he disagreed with me. So reluctantly, I decided to come. But I'm being honest about it.
Right.
When it comes to financial, banking, economic things, I have an Achilles heel there. I'm not on top of the issues. So I meant it.
Yeah.
But
so we go to the same market, buy the Kinke, you put money on the table for Kimati and others to have something for them. So you would know what the status of the economy is.
I would feel the heat if there is heat. I'll feel also the light if there is light. Because as a human being, you are within the economy.
Right.
So you feel it. But it would not be an expert analysis of why the heat or the light.
Okay.
I could.
So you represent a huge constituency. Everybody is listening. Let's hear you.
See, but I would go step by step.
Right, go ahead.
You know, okay, maybe let me start with where you began from in terms of the size of government.
Because the minister's information have been reacting and justifying all of that.
The size is unprecedented. Nobody can dispute that. If you do a historical recollection.
Unprecedented and unnecessary and a waste?
Well, you are now putting words in my mouth. Unprecedented, that's obvious. You can see it. And so you cannot deny it. But the question is, who made it so? It's the president, the appointing authority. And if you talk to the president, he will be telling you about his vision and mission and what he wants to achieve. And then will tell you that the end will justify the means based on what the outcome will be. I've had such arguments with him, I have to be honest with you. And he's clearly not in the mood to review. That's the last encounter that I had with him relative to this size and the number of ministers and all the rest. And it's not necessarily the cost, because you see some of them are even MPs. Some don't take double salaries if you put all
They take
together.
enhanced salaries.
But it's still not.
Actually, as a deputy minister for finance and also a member of parliament, I'm not taking any additional. what I collected as an MP is what I'm taking as
I know about that.
Nothing whatsoever.
He's right.
So it's not enhanced in any way.
No, but you have an enhanced package as a minister. What you have, the MPs don't have.
But so you are not talking of the emoluments.
Yeah, you're not talking about salaries.
Yes.
I thought you said enhanced salaries. That was
okay.
But
enhanced conditions of service.
Yes, but whatever it is, his emphasis is on the vision, the mission, and for that matter, the outcome. But the outcome will only come at the end when we are doing an assessment. Okay.
But that's good, and it's a departure from the double salary takers. Yeah.
That animal is something we interrogate later. So that's the way the president sees it. I think that if along the line, before the next elections, if he could find a way of cutting down the number, I would go for that, to be honest with you. Now also, there are ministries that could be merged, you know, that also they can take a look at it. But I'm not very sure whether the Ministry of Regional Organization has finished its job. I'm not too sure about that. I think that it needs some little time to consolidate and consummate. So that is not one of the ministries that I'm looking at in terms of merging and things. But look, where my real emphasis is...
So, Kweku,
yeah.
If the president is listening, who is he listening to? If he were not listening to media and social media commentators and social commentators, he should be listening to this group of people: Professor Peter Korte, Professor Alex Ankuma Asante, Professor Augustine Fosu, Professor Robert Dako Osei, Professor Charles Aka, Dr. Fred Janku, Dr. Ama Pokua Feni, Dr. Richmond Atta Ankuma, Dr. Andrew Ejay Holmes, Mr. Duke Lamte, and the job they did is reviewed by Professor D.K. Trelfo, Professor E. Nketia Amponsa, Professor E. Osei Sibe, Professor Seneja, Professor D.B. Sapong, Professor Ejiri Tete, and Dr. P.T. Bafo, Professor Wayoseni, Dr. F.E. Texan. Look, who is he listening to if he's really listening? They have said that they have confirmed things that you yourself have been against.
Yes, but the president is not listening to only these names, big names,
He's listening
big brains.
to party people.
Well, party people included. But you see, and I'm not going to say the president said what I'm saying. Take note. When the president goes on tour, meeting the people who don't have the big names, what do they tell him? Do they talk about the numbers that we are talking about? No, they don't. Well, at least that's what, when he goes out there, he hears different things. The roads, you know, fuel.
Okay, so proceed to your next analysis.
Yes.
But I also think the president must even listen to himself as the man holding the vision. What is he
yes,
telling him?
So his vision and mission tell him a lot. Yeah. And then when he meets the people out there, not the professors, not the economists, they also talk, and he listens to them. I'm saying that during those tours, this issue of numbers do not come up.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
And
I haven't said he said so.
Okay. Yes, go proceed.
Yeah. But you see, my emphasis is on this free SHS thing. And perhaps it's because of my ideological orientation. Look, I'll be so disappointed if this particular policy is subjected to any review that will lead to its, you know, the impact reducing. I'll be so disappointed. It's a bold decision, and we must stick to it. Look, there's so much waste in this system. Billions of dollars.
The World Bank says we can't account for $2 billion every year.
We should be placing
we
should put emphasis on how to at least arrest that thing and then divert the resources to free SHS. I'll be so disappointed. When the finance minister made that comment, which was apparently his personal view, I was opposed to it. We took him on here. And I realized that even Kweku is shifting along that line. Look, the government, before it decided to implement this policy, they discussed it. I have an analysis document here, which emanated from the cabinet interrogation of the issues. This is dated June 2017, titled Analysis Document of Implementation of the Free Senior High School thing. And they looked at all the options. Before then, they looked at the history, the kind of things we've done to help, okay, capacitate people in schools, the free secondary school education for people of nothing extraction. I'm sure we all know what I'm talking about. It began actually pre-independence. Then there is the Cocoa Board scholarship and bursaries. There is the merit scholarship for secondary schools. There is the senior high school subsidy. I think that came somewhere 2001. And then the progressively free education of the Mahama administration. They analyzed all that, did the financial outlays, and assessed the impact as to which one to adopt. It's here, very well documented. So they just didn't get up and decide to do it. So they realized that, look, doing it across board from first year to third year, the physical impact would be impossible to operationalize. So they went for the one that starts from Form 1 to first year, second year, all that, and they calculated all the fiscal impact, that is how much money will be required. In doing so, too, they were looking at the opportunities that will be created, the previous opportunities, how many people were captured in the net, and how many were unable to get into the net due to financial constraints.
So your point is that all these assessments prior to embarking on this project are superior to all the others that are now coming forward, including from, you know, such a group like
they
like
considered they considered this document here, it's all there. They considered all those things. But of course, having begun the implementation, it comes within the wider context of impact. What is it that is happening?
Okay.
The double track, of course, came in to as a transitional solution.
It wasn't anticipated.
Yeah, it wasn't anticipated, but I'm saying that's it. That's the point I'm making. That implementation, operationalization of the project will throw up new challenges. And then you have to look for remedies for those challenges as you move on. That's the point I'm making. Because you are not God. You can't think everything into
No, but if the ideas are such superior and smart, they ought to have anticipated that there will be the need for double track.
No, I'm saying
when the schools that were being built had not been finished.
Superiority is not synonymous with perfection, in my candid opinion. You can have a superior argument compared to other arguments around that you seek to implement. It doesn't mean challenges will not occur. So I have no difficulty with that. Right. They've learned their lessons there. They are curing the double track problem. They are curing it.
With very disturbing difficulties.
The same way, progressively free education of the Mahama administration also left out a chunk of people who potentially could have gone in. Who are they? They are human resource of the nation. And what danger do they pose to us? All those things, you never can get a perfect scenario, to be honest with you. So, to be honest, I am saying that we have bitten the bullet, we should continue to chew it.
Okay. All right. What next would you
relative
proceed
to free SHS?
What next would you proceed to on the economy?
You see, the debt politics. Debt.
Yes, the debt.
Yes. It's been here for a very long time. When coups were fashionable, governments were overthrown, and some of those reasons given was this, especially like also devaluation or currency depreciation. We've passed that stage.
No, but we have a regime that had promised that this was the problem because of poor economic management, and they were going to take care of it.
Check your history.
And they
all
came
of them
and
said
they
so.
came and it is worse.
No,
is
check,
it
Mr.
not?
Tepes, check.
No, the debt situation.
Maybe you are talking quantum.
It's worse.
Yes, you can only talk of debt as a relative to GDP, but if you just take the...
Thank you, Kuku, continue.
Well, see, I am making the case that politics of debt didn't begin today. And indeed, the NDC itself did some. 2008 election, there was one of the key issues that came up. I had a running debate with President Mahama, then running mate. Okay? And even HIPIC and all the rest. Yes. So, and I deliberately mentioned you because I know you are an expert in that area. I've read a lot of literature that he had authored. Okay? Indeed, 1998, Ghana declined to go HIPIC.
Yes.
We declined. We were offered the opportunity and we declined because of so many political reasons and other matters.
But the major one was the Japanese yen.
Yes,
Japanese
but 2001, we went along it, and that became in itself a problem. Eventually, I think it created a certain fiscal space for us. Am I right?
Yes, there was a fiscal space.
For us to move forward. So, yes, election 2016, it was also a campaign issue. The NPP raised it, articulated a lot of concerns over that. I never heard them say they will not borrow, as others say. I heard them complain about reckless borrowing, whatever that meant. The truth is that what we cannot deny today is that in terms of the quantum, yes, it's huge. And it's growing quickly. In terms of percentage to GDP, I think it's looking a bit good because we did rebasing.
Even that is
in recent times. The rebasing has helped. It's the same thing that happened. If you remember when we rebased 2010,
yes,
it created a big space for us. So perhaps we proceeded to do borrowing to the extent, always looking at the rebasing environment, that it has helped us.
Okay.
Same danger exists for this administration.
But what would you say to this administration, their approach in accepting or using this particular, report by ISE, because ISE is seeking to influence the 2020 budget. And Koku just told us, he's just coming from a conference where they are putting the budget together.
Well, they should take a look at it. They should look at the caliber of people behind the report
it's
and
like
the history
consultancy.
And the history of the agency itself. It's huge. You cannot, and government should be willing to look at this report. People like us should even all embrace it and study it. Of course, you don't have to agree with every detail.
Right.
And look, my brother, when it comes to policy making, decision making, those who have been elected are those with a primary responsibility. It's good
By
to
the
cultivate.
Constitution, they are supposed to exercise power that we give them, and so the exercise is on our behalf. So even though they have been elected, they must still listen.
They could be punished at the polls if they don't listen. That's the ultimate remedy. That if the people are not satisfied with your performance, come the elections, they will be affected.
Okay.
But I'm saying that they definitely must take a look at such a document coming from a powerful, well-resourced agency.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Dr. Texan,
and have I finished? Can I go?
Yeah, you can conclude.
No, can I go home?
We'll go to Nigeria shortly. Yes. So, yes. A few comments and very briefly about what your expectations of how the government should embrace this report.
I mean, quite clearly, we are giving them free consultancy. I mean, this flagship report has been there for all these years, and the data in there is coming from very reliable sources. And
are there any specific areas that you would like to highlight for their attention?
Yeah, we highlighted the reports. I mean, one, to prioritize our domestic revenue mobilization, and the need to cut down the size of government. I mean, some of us were very disappointed when the president appointed those number of ministers and deputy ministers, because before his government, we had complained that the size of government from the NDC was too large and they had to reduce it. So when it came up, we hear my senior brother here say that the president is not willing to change his appointment for me.
At the last conversation he had with him on this subject,
so
things may have changed.
The president should take a look at it. We think it's important. I mean, at least if for anything, it gives a clear signal that the government wants to do something about these expenditures. I mean, and so that really also has an influence on all other sectors of the economy.
And you think also that NAPCO is delayed unemployment?
Yeah, it's delayed unemployment, definitely. I mean, the people who get back, if we have not expanded the productive base of the economy to generate the employment that they need, like the Deputy Minister says, the private sector should lead that. What sort of infrastructure are we putting in place for them? What are we doing about the cost of doing business in this country? So these are the sort of things that we need to invest in to reduce the cost of doing business, attract foreign direct investment that will generate jobs, especially in agro-processing and tourism for this economy. Now, when you're able to do that, these men and women will leave NAPCO. We might not even necessarily need it if you are generating the jobs. I mean, so that we free some of
the tax exemption bit you are concerned about, and that is huge.
Yeah, that is 4.2.
What do you think informs their government's generally inability to rake in as much and allow so much exemptions?
No, tax exemptions are good policies. I mean, you give tax exemptions if you think that the firms that are giving exemptions to are going to generate employment for you to begin to collect income taxes from the employment that comes thereof. But we are concerned more about whether those who are receiving the tax exemptions are generating employment that we think they should generate. I mean, so for instance, if you give import exemptions, I mean, the idea is to give import exemptions for intermediate inputs that are going to be expand our productive base. So that if we are finding out, and that's why we call for the publishing of the firms that receive those exemptions, for us to subject that content to analysis to find out if these firms really need and we know in this part of the world that at times these exemptions are given to cronies and stuff like that, and that is why we are cautioning and asking that it should be done. We also make a very good recommendation to look at the remuneration of CEOs of state-owned enterprises that we think that should be tied to their competence and not necessarily being there to pay these monies. And of course, I mean, coming to what my senior brother was saying, nobody is saying that the free SHS should be suspended. We are talking about the financing. It's having a toll on our fiscal budget, and we need to do something about it. I mean,
but I didn't say cancellation. I was talking of even reviewing it to reduce its impact. Comprehensive.
Yeah, we can review it.
We should fight it. Get it done.
We can review it and look at the financing and make those who can pay.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm against.
Yeah,
that's also discriminatory.
Yes, but your point is made. Yes, all right.
It's not. You need to target subsidies. You cannot go on funding an indiscriminate subsidy. It isn't going to work.
Okay.
I mean, no country does this. We need to target the subsidies.
All right.
We need to find out those. I mean, if I don't need it, when you give me that money, it's not going to make any difference to me.
All right.
I'll prefer that you hold that subsidy for me and give it to that poor woman whose kids will need an extra support apart from the free SHS to improve the quality of education.
Can I read
Thank you very much.
No, Samson,
I'm picking very
they looked at that issue, and I even still disagree, but let me read it. Impact, they looked at the issue of this needy...
Okay, just read that portion and I'll move
targeting of the poor stroke needy students. And said impact, given the lack of funding for the survey to do the needs assessment for the rest of the country, this option cannot be relied upon anytime soon to provide the needed data for targeting to relieve parents still struggling to pay fees. It was therefore considered unsuitable for adoption. My view is that, look, it's only people who lack the courage and who are not prepared to look at alternative sources of funding.
The reason they cited for not wanting
we are chopping the oil money left, right, center. We can't use it to educate people.
Those are other issues.
There's too much waste and corruption.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So Mr. Tepe, they had some policy options. They said Ghana's economy is doing well, but social and governance challenges must be addressed. The government must prioritize inclusive growth, focusing on productivity growth with structural reforms to move up the value chain and improve skills. This requires an urgent improvement in domestic resource mobilization through tax compliance and broadening of the tax base. How many times have I heard this?
Well, we lack the time to look at tax issues, but I think I can relate to. Let me make a couple of points.
Yes, in some 2 minutes, please.
2 minutes, okay. You know, first of all, we have come from FQ, school under trees, and all that, which is still on the budget, and expanding. Primary education, you are adding secondary, and I just pointed out that we are going to be adding tertiary. And this is why, on our side, we are calling for this review. let me have a caution on exemptions and not to raise expectations. Much of the exemptions that we give are for projects, government projects. And the loan requirement says you can't use the money to pay loans, including in the World Bank. And this was a huge debate, when, during my stint at the fund, whether the bank should be. And so what you are going to have is, and we used to have, I'll come back to it. What you are going to have is, yes, my loan won't pay taxes. Your budget can pay the taxes. And that means that the ministries, departments, agencies will have to budget, and include it in the budget, right? Subsequent to which, GRA will collect it, but it will cross out.
Okay.
Yes, and so I think that, I'm not saying that we started the exemption review. I believe that it is near completion.
All right.
And I think that we can have a
very
conversation.
much. Now, Kweku,
but let me make a quick point. I think Kweku should look at, their own, I don't mean senior Kweku, your report. Here you see years going up, it came down, it's going up, and you see the rate of accumulation of debt itself also going up. When you say it's going down, this is the rate of accumulation of debt. When you say it's going down, that is when you exclude the financial sector costs. It's in the debt management report. This is official.
Okay.
But when you include it, it's going up. And then when you include it, it means that, that's what the point I made earlier on.
All right. All right. So Kweku, they are talking about, prioritizing inclusive growth, focusing on productivity, growth with structural reforms to move up. They're saying you need urgent improvement in domestic resource mobilization and broadening the tax net. And they say it is time to have a national dialogue on public expenditure management. In this era of fiscal challenges and tightening of public expenditure budget, it is imperative to look at the extent to which public expenditures are wasted. We can no longer afford the public purse to be lost through fraud, waste, and corruption. What do you say?
Well, that cannot be questioned in any way, and we should take all steps we can to deal with wastage and corruption and the misapplication of scarce resources. And I say again, where we said we consider the Auditor General and even all the agencies that fight corruption as our friends, because we see the pain in getting money in response to various requests. So there's no question about that. What I can say about the report generally is that we would definitely consider some of the suggestions that have been given in the report. Already, there are things that even within government we've been having conversation on. And so we have no difficulty considering the points they have made and picking from it what it is that we can pick to improve the work that we're doing. On exemptions, we almost completely agree with them that the current exemptions regime is problematic. We have too much of our tax base going out into exemptions. And as you would know, we have actually put before Parliament an exemptions bill. But a lot of questions have been raised, some of which Honorable Tepe has mentioned. And we are taking our time to ensure that in the end we have a document that would respond to the various perspectives that have been shared. But overall, we are happy for this kind of dialogue, and we should continue to pursue it, except to say something, that we should be careful what we call the dialogue. It must not be restricted to just the elite who would have all these perspectives. As Kweku said, when the president or people in government go to the countryside, the people there, what are they also saying? We should factor all that into the dialogue and ensure that in the end, government has delivered the best we can. Okay.
Thank you very much. And just one comment from Dr. Charles Rekugrobe, and we take a break and return to deal with the matter of examine how the border closure is hurting local business. It's only Dr. Texin who will leave us, and a representative of GUTA joins us. And Dr. Charles Rekugrobe is asking, he says, there is no country in the world that provides free presidential secondary education. When did we become the exceptional wonderland? We should look at that. So on that note, I say thank you very much to Dr. Ebo Texin, Senior Lecturer, Department of Economics, University of Ghana. I'm just hearing that your birthday was when? Is it yesterday or today?
Yes, please, yesterday.
Yesterday?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, sir. Happy birthday. All right, so we'll take a break. We'll be right back. You're welcome back, and the birthday man, Dr. Texin, has left us. We have been joined by Clement Boateng, who is national organizer of GUTA, the Ghana Union of Traders Association. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Great.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the Nigerian border closure, and as I mentioned to you earlier, a government delegation is supposed presently to be in Nigeria. There's been some work that's been going on, even at the level of the president, at the level of the setting ministers, Minister of, Alan Tremanting and others, and then now there's another delegation that is in there. But Joy News is also have gone through the borders and is also monitoring what these ministers or delegation is doing. Before I go to the phone and speak to Gifty Ando-Apia, head of our security desk, who is checking on this for us, let's share some of the comments that you have brought in. Bonti Benjamin in Achima Buakwa says that, in as much as I agree with the ISA report, I think we must commend this government for implementing sustainable projects that will benefit the masses directly. Gilbert Bwedu says Mr. Tepe is simply pushing an impossible route on the free SHS. Here in the UK, they don't have 100% infrastructure to cater for the demand. My daughter waited 3 months before getting a space in a school. When we relocated, there are always people waiting in line for space. Peter Yachi says no one should sit in Accra and think that free SHS is a waste of money. I'm not sure anybody said that. We must think of the needy Ghanaians who would have been sitting in the house and unable to access unable to access HSS. I think that's exactly what Issa is talking about. The needy ones, those who really have a need for it. Kofi Atta says the problem is there are no reliable data on income levels of individuals and families in Ghana, except those in regular employment and the public sector. So how would the government include or exclude people from free SHS? Right, that is a legitimate question. Now, right, let's get to the phones. We start with our own Gifty Ando-Apia. Thank you very much. Gifty, are you on the line?
I'm here, something.
Great. Okay. So you have been doing such a great work, checking on the borders at night and meeting and finding out how exactly the Nigerians are implementing the border restrictions, and you can tell us how exactly it looks like and the impact of the closure on the people that you have been speaking to.
Well, there's something I can start with the border restrictions and things that I've observed. So first of all, when you get to the semi-border here in Benin, you have tons of volunteers rushing up to you who are Nigerians, rushing up to you and asking if you want them to take you across, of course, at a fee. First of all, you will get, if you want to go with them, these volunteers. If you don't want to go with them, you go through the system, you get your passport stamped at the Benin side, you go to the Nigerian side, you get it stamped, and then you go through a pedestrian passport check, and then another gate before you get out to the other side. If you're traveling across from there, there are several security personnel, or let me say men in uniform, who litter the border itself on the Nigerian side. And then when you set off from there to wherever you're going, you meet several officials. So on a journey of about 30 minutes drive, we had met about 10 security posts. And these people include Nigerian police, Nigerian immigration officers, Nigerian customs officials, Nigerian drug law enforcement agency, and some people they're calling road safety. They're not uniformed people. And when you're coming back, you still see these guards at the entrance. Right after the guards check you, there's another team of guards at that point who look at your passport. From there, you move on. You go and stamp at the Nigerian border. You again stamp at the Benin border. You go through, and then you get some more checks before you can get out. So these are the sort of border restrictions. So you're not supposed to carry any goods. In fact, whatever it is that you're carrying, they'll check you, especially if it's a lot. They'll open your boots. They'll check, especially if you're carrying rice. They don't tolerate that at all. But they do all these thorough checks, make sure that what you're carrying, they're satisfied it's just personal effects. Otherwise, you're not allowed to take these through. Regarding the impact, there have been impacts on both the Nigerian and the Benin side. Prices have soared. They tell me that business has slowed, and this is definitely affecting the economy. There's something interesting here, something about fuel sales. You know, in Ghana, you go to the pumps or you go to the fuel station, you buy your fuel. Well, here in Benin, fuel is sold in beer bottles. So you have every home, almost every home sells fuel, and they put it on the table. What they're telling me is that the fuel prices at the pumps the prices have gone higher. And so this business, fuel business they do on the tabletop that the government is trying to discourage people from doing has actually boomed. It's soaring because the fuel at the pumps have now become very expensive because you can't get them through. But people are smuggling them in gallons, and so they can sell in front of provision shops. People are selling fuels in beer bottles. So that's also going on here. There are Ivorians who have been affected. People say their businesses are on the verge of collapse and unemployment. When I went to the Nigerian side, they told me their young men don't have jobs because most of them do business on the border. And so they've lost their jobs. They say there's abuse of women sometimes. There are complaints of sexual abuse. There are complaints of physical abuse, which some of these people allege some of the border officials are causing. Some say it's making some corrupt officials actually very, very rich. And when it comes to smuggling, it's still going on. And I can confirm this, that this is something that the Nigerian government has said the policy is supposed to curb. But smuggling is still going on.
We understand that the Nigerians themselves are unhappy. They are complaining about this particular circumstance. Yes. What can you report about that? And then bring us up to speed on the negotiations and the various meetings that you tell us about government and the Nigerian side holding.
So the Nigerians are complaining. Of course, there's still a lot of apprehension if you approach anybody to speak to it, but they're still complaining. Like I said, they talk about unemployment. They talk about how it's affecting their businesses. Some of them have said that this is a good intervention, but they think that the timing and the implementation aren't right. They describe the policy as a terrible one. In fact, they believe that it's some sort of a targeted attack. Some will say political enemies of the government. Some will say ethnic groups, etc. So that conversation is going on. In terms of government intervention, I must say that I was not a part of the government delegation, but we got information of their interaction with the drivers and their interaction with the Nigerian delegation. The first meeting happened on the 16th of October when the Shelia Koboche, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and the Minister for Trade and Industry, Alan Chamatin, met with their Nigerian counterparts. They had that discussion. At that discussion, they agreed that there would be the Ghanaian delegation would furnish them with information on the Ghanaians who have been stranded at the border so that there could be some sort of arrangement for them to move their things. Now, the follow-up we know happened just on Wednesday, between Wednesday and Thursday. That is when the deputy ministers came in to meet the Nigerian delegation. We understand at that meeting that they gave them a list of the Ghanaians who are stranded at the border, and the hope is that they've actually signed a memorandum of understanding. The hope is that if the Nigerian authorities implement the memorandum of understanding, then it means that the Ghanaians who have been stranded at the border will be allowed some sort of passageway.
Do we have an idea the numbers of Ghanaian traders who are stranded at this Benin side of the border? Because we understand that the closure is actually not targeted at Ghana, but Benin for exporting contraband goods, particularly rice.
Well, something on that, what will happen with the MOU will help us either confirm or reject that this is not targeted at Ghana, because the idea is to get Ghanaians, specifically Ghanaians who have been stranded there, to go through. That is what the Nigerians have said. They claim that people from Benin are smuggling things into the country. But what the people on the ground here tell me is that with or without the policy, smuggling will still go on. Some
we understand that Benin's economy, 20% of almost 20% of its GDP depends on the trade that happens between using that border. But can we have an idea of the numbers of Ghanaian traders who are stranded and for whom the Ghanaian delegation is seeking as an immediate redress to get them access?
So what we saw at the border when we went there yesterday was scores of these trucks. You could count about 100 of them, something. And it's a very restricted area, so it was very difficult approaching the Ghanaians since we're not governmental officials or we're not coming as a government delegation. But when we managed to get in there, some of the drivers told us there's about 60 to 70 of them there. That's the drivers who are camped. There's a sort of a yard where all these trucks have been parked. And they say that their documents have been taken by the authorities, so they can neither go in nor go out. So even if you want to return to Ghana, you can't do that because your documents have been taken. So the drivers tell us there's between 50 to 70 of them. But that's just the drivers who are stranded at the border.
The president is said to have donated an amount of about 450,000 CFA francs to the stranded Ghanaian drivers there. There's been some questions about that. Have you been able to pick any reactions from that?
So we interacted with the drivers and we asked them. I mean, they actually told us that they had actually their family and friends have been calling them, saying that they've received some 450,000 CDs, 50,000 CFA each. And then they had to correct them and say, no, that amount was meant for all of us. And so we had to share it. If you look at the number, they say they're about 50 to 70. If they have to share 450,000 CFA, they tell us that each of them ended up getting 5,000 CFA. 5,000 CFA is like 46 Ghana cedis.
All right.
That's what each of them said they got.
Okay.
And so they were reacting to calls that they were getting from their family and friends back in Ghana that they made some money.
All right. Gifty, keep up with a good job. We expect you to file in more of the report, particularly good news about a final resolution that brings a lot of reprieve to the Ghanaian traders, more particularly on the border. Thank you very much, Gifty. Ando Apia is head of the security desk of Joy News. Okay, so maybe we start with Guta. We were told, for example, how much is this hurting your businesses? We're told, for example, that Casapreco is losing about $2 million to the closure of this particular border.
Thank you for having me. As for Casapreco, he belongs to Association of Ghana Industries.
All right.
Yeah, so we don't have knowledge of how much he has actually lost.
Yes, how about your people?
Well, our people, the money that our people have lost, I cannot quantify it, especially coming from the background of recent financial turmoil that our people, has lost huge sums of money. So coupled with this closure of the border, they have actually lost huge sums of money, but I cannot be specific on the quantum of amount that our people have
The closure
lost.
has been since sometime in August. How are they managing this situation?
In fact, it's a big blow because, most of our members, who have lost those huge sums of money, goes there, do their purchases, and then they put it into trucks so that they will, take the lead, and then the trucks will later bring in their goods.
Right.
And as your reporter rightly said, we have over 100 trucks, that are at the exit point of exiting the Nigerian border.
Okay.
So you could imagine,
the closure came without
yes,
warning.
The closure came, yes, the closure came, yes, without warning. And we would have been very happy if at least the Nigerian authorities could have also but that didn't come, and that is where Guta is, worried about. As I'm talking to you now, most of the goods that are piled up at the border, there some are perishable, and a lot of them have gone bad. Those also who were able, to even return the goods to wherever they made their purchases, even though some of them have collected the goods back, but in case of, in terms of refund, they've not been able to, get their refund.
What do you say to those who say, you guys should just shut up, because look, this is what you get if you treat Nigerians in Ghana the manner some of your members with some say tacit support of Guta leadership are treating Nigerian businesses in Ghana over the matter of retail trade?
That is a big no. That is a big no. We don't have to, shut our mouths, because we are talking in terms of the ECOWAS protocol, and the foundation of the ECOWAS protocol, as we all know, is free movement of goods, people, and services. So if one country, decides to shut his border without informing the other nations, then it flouts the ECOWAS protocol. And even regarding the ECOWAS protocol, we all know that we are supposed to trade among ourselves within 90 days. After 90 days, you have to revert back to your country of origin. If you want to establish in the country, you have to go by the country's sovereign laws. And as I'm talking to you now, no government or no head of state has had the courage to even ratify the establishment of the ECOWAS protocol or the residence of the ECOWAS protocol. What we are all using now is the free movement of goods, people, and services. So it is very bad on the part of the Nigerian authorities to just rise up one day and then shut down its borders without informing the other members.
So right now, your only hope is that government, intervention will yield some very quick fruit, so that your people who are stranded can
yes. That is what we are hoping for, because you see, when this border was even shut down, it took Guta's press release for government to even got the knowledge of the border of the closure. After we had issued the press statement, then we were called by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So listening to them, they even didn't know that something of that sort was going on. So after we told them, then the minister promises that within 10 days, they were going to do something about it. And then within that 10 days, they are going to call us back. Fine. The 10 days did not even reach. It was just after 3 days that we were called. Now, on the second meeting, when we went there were a lot of governmental agencies, notable the BNI was there, National Security was there, Customs was there, Immigration was there. And after we presented our case again, they really told us that we have a genuine case and that they are going to embark on a trip to the Nigerian authorities to make sure that the issue will be resolved.
Okay. Let's listen to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment of Nigeria, Otumba Adebayo. We'll listen to him briefly on what he had to say about this particular closure, and then President Akufo-Addo speaking about the situation.
I think the first thing to say in response to this, we're within ECOWAS, we respect the ECOWAS rules, free movement of persons and goods, and that should continue. This is it's targeting criminal activities, you know, not countries, and so I think that has to be clear. So, you know, in addressing a particular country's issue, it will not be a disadvantage to any other country, because for us it's really just a measure to address a particular mischief. In terms of timelines, you know, we're getting there with regard to the mischief that we want to address, but clearly there's going to be flexibility to maintain the spirit and the rules of ECOWAS, and that's what we're trying to do with Ghana, to find solutions to particular challenges that we're facing, and we're pretty confident that we'll be able to address that very quickly.
We're about to enter quite a delicate period in the ECOWAS journey. We're looking ahead at the possibility of a single currency and trying to forge greater integration amongst our economies. And at the same time, we have important security and other issues which confront us. We have this business of the closure of the border with Benin, which would seem for some people to be a big blow to the ECOWAS project. But I believe that there are other considerations that we all have to look at and examine to find a way so that we can live in this region in harmony and allow each one of us our national ambitions to be fulfilled. So there's a lot of room for continuing jaw-drawing and dialoguing and cross-fertilization of ideas between your country and Ghana. I mean, with Ghana and Nigeria, our economies are working properly and strongly. It resolves almost half of the problems in West Africa. You know, the future of our region. I treasure the opportunity to do my little bit to advance that relationship.
All right, so you heard Nigeria's Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, and in that meeting saying that this was targeted at, you know, criminal activity and individuals and not countries. And in that meeting you saw Shelley Ayeko-Boche, and that's the meeting that Giftia Ando, I think, had referred to earlier. And now there's another group that is also seeking to see what they can do presently about that. Let me start with Kweku Bako on what his thoughts are about this particular development in a time when people are saying that, you know, they will enforce it very strictly, particularly against Ghanaians who are seeking to have access, because as we speak, in the last few months, and even now, just yesterday as we speak, Nigerians in Swam magazine are being treated very sharply by members of the Guta.
See, those stranded, and especially the Ghanaians, we should be concerned by their safety, their security, even their health.
Right.
One brings sanitation challenges and all those things. This is a human problem. People are stranded. And there are hundreds, I'm told, vehicles and human beings. They have families here. You can imagine the psychological stress and things. So it's a very serious problem, and we need to look quickly as to how we can make sure.
And their businesses are in trouble.
Yes.
As we hear, Kasapreko alone is losing upwards of $2 million.
It's a very serious matter.
Because we know that that's a big market for Kasapreko.
Yeah, very serious matter. But sometimes it makes you wonder whether this whole quest for sub-regional cooperation, unity, the market, is worth it. Why do we do this to ourselves?
It's certainly worth it. We are going to host the after
Yes,
process.
I am for it. But I'm saying that when these things happen, the governments of these countries, they don't do proud engagement. We're talking of cross-border crime. We are trying to integrate our security services. We're doing all sorts of things to equip the sub-region. Different countries collaborating. At the same time, we do things like this. It doesn't bring harmony. And that's why perhaps we haven't succeeded relative to ECOWAS since 1975. I'm not saying there have been no progress. There have been some progress. But each time, there's a challenge somewhere, and the challenge takes away the enthusiasm, the commitment. And what is happening, there's a classic case, I think, of Nigerian unilateralism in seeking to cure some mischief. But without constructive engagement, they've created chaos all over the place. I'm not too happy about that.
Some will say the Nigerian government has always been proactive in protecting, its citizens and traders. There are many times when they don't blink. They say, you can't bring this to our country. They shut their borders to us.
They do that.
But we hardly are able to do that.
Because they are a giant within the community of the sub-region. No, they are a giant. There's no doubt about that. But being a giant requires some level of quality leadership from them to make sure this whole vision of ECOWAS works. Okay? I have a little problem with our friends also, and I hope I'm not misunderstood, taking the law into their own hands and closing shops and things. I have a difficulty with that as well.
The state is not alive to its responsibilities. You have a law that says that foreigners should not engage in, retail trade. And
yes.
Foreigners are coming and they are in retail trade. You are not doing anything about it.
So you are voting
and their
for
businesses are in trouble.
So you are voting for constitutional lawlessness.
Well, that's what happens if you don't enforce the laws.
Constitutional lawlessness. That's what you are voting for. I'm not suggesting that's what you are advocating, but it amounts to that.
That's when real vigilantism comes.
See, are there no legal options? Can't somebody take on government or the appropriate authorities through legal means? Is it impossible? Civil society.
They're not ready for the cost and the waste.
But so look, Occupy
time
Ghana.
in going to court.
Maybe the comparison is the analogy is a bit misplaced. But a group like the Occupy Ghana had to activate the constitution, get the highest court of the land to deal with this disallowance and surcharge thing. It was law. The Auditor Generals that have come and gone had not dealt with it the way it had to be dealt with. The court empowers and it's being done. Look, let's create that culture of litigating, of seeking redress using the appropriate institutions of state. In this case, the judiciary.
Week, Professor Tuguba was talking about governance standstill when a nation comes to that point. But why should there be laws that those we pay to enforce the laws don't enforce it, and the citizens must spend money to go to court and ask a court to compel you to do what you are paid to do anyway?
Which is the luxury of alternative that we have? Which one? Which one would you prefer? So they should go out there and enforce the law themselves? That's what you are saying? Is that what we want? It's unfortunate that those who've empowered to do what the law says should do are not doing it. So they should go out there and enforce the law. What are the implications? I don't think we can endorse that too. Just the same way I'm criticizing Nigeria for the unilateral decisions they've taken and the way they are going about it. I cannot sit here and pretend that what the Ghanaian contingent traders too are doing is something one can endorse. It's lawless. We shouldn't encourage them. We understand them, but we shouldn't encourage them to take that path. Look, are Ghanaians not trading in Nigeria as well?
Of course.
Could there not be retaliatory consequences? Have we thought about that too? Some of our families, sisters, brothers are there and trading. If the law perhaps is not implementable, then perhaps we should take another look at the law. let's take another look at the act. Perhaps the ideal is not what we have put in there. So we should take a look at it. But otherwise, look, we cannot continue this way. That's my own view on this matter.
All right. Yeah. Now, Mr. Setukwe, what do you say and what ought to be done? But for some people, if you look, give it to Nigeria. They are protecting their own. We don't do that as much. They do it, and we are complaining because we are suffering.
I think it requires an evaluation of policy, of law, and operations. We are part of ECOWAS. And in the context of ECOWAS, you can put it in the context of EU and Germany's role as a dominant partner, within, and when during the financial crisis and the muzzle that sometimes Germany brought to bear, sometimes some say positively, some say no, in terms of, and we are going to be going there as we talk about common currency, and all those issues. They are going to come up. We are going to be approaching what, Germany is to the EU, what Nigeria represents, ECOWAS. I think you go to the ECA, East African, community, and Kenya. Kenya's muzzle is felt. I've done some missions there in terms of business, in terms of, so I believe what we have to do is what small countries, the smart thing that small countries, often do. Another way do it in unison, which sometimes is not effective, or bring along other smaller Benin, Togo, and others of the size, as a counterweight to, this massive. And I'm saying this because in my own experience, remember EPA, today we had to go interim, because of Nigerian stance. Forget about the pros and cons of whatever. Cote d'Ivoire had to also go interim, and we realized that with Cote d'Ivoire going interim and other countries going interim, it meant that, it was going to be harmful to us if we were to stick and move along, with Nigeria. The same with the common external tariff, which eventually was signed, but there were various derogations, specifically with respect to imports into Nigeria for rice, for cement, and for, for other. Without those derogations, you couldn't.
Government has, tried to, on a humanitarian, grounds, reach out to them, giving some money to assist Kweku, how we should be concerned about their states as they are stranded along that border. But government, you would realize the foreign affairs minister, the trade and industry minister, and I think one other initially went to that country to meet their counterparts. Yes. And then subsequently, you have the deputies in these ministries. You have people from immigration and customs also going and meeting their counterparts. Why do you think we are not getting a quicker solution, or we need the president to talk to Buhari immediately about it?
And I'm sure His Excellency would have spoken to, President Buhari already. I mean, knowing the way these things, operate, there's no question about that. Or maybe at vice president level, there can be some consultation. Ultimately, we'll get I have no doubt.
Because it appears the ministers went, we didn't get too much. The deputies have gone together with other officers.
Because it's involving, you saw the minister.
Right.
They have their reasons for doing it. It may be the official reason. But your point is, I was going to come to you in terms of operations. If this is going to, to occur, then it's time, because it wasn't as it wasn't as pronounced as it is now. There have been border closures in the past, and I stand for correction.
Yeah.
Maybe it lasted, hours, it lasted a couple of days and whatever. But we are seeing this, which is having a more serious impact. So I would want to suggest His Excellency's initiative in that intervention being formalized for a rapid response, among immigration, because there are those who want to, as we were told by your correspondent, there are those who want to come back home. Their documentation is on the other side. Right. So if we had, we begin to put in place maybe a rapid response between ourselves and, in the event that these things continue, maybe some insurance scheme, whether by GUTA with the insurance industry. And this is where micro insurance, which, we attempted to launch, and I believe it's still on the books come in for those who would have lost, businesses, because it's just like the financial sector issues. Those who lose most are those with small, working capital, small. So I think it has been elevated to a certain point, where we may want to have that, rapid response team in the nature of what we have by NADMO, for environmental and other, between Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, Immigration, and all the agencies that are, and the agencies which are, while the policy dialogue, continues. But we are going to be facing this, as I said, and there's a policy perspective. I think, as you mentioned, we are going to host the Continental Free Trade Area, and this is where the internal practices also come. In the medium to long term, is it going to be an open Africa, which is where ECOWAS was moving, and therefore that's where the review of the law comes in. But maybe making, in consultation with GUTA, AGI, who are also part of this Chamber of Commerce, maybe competitiveness, strategy to make it feasible for us to withstand these pressures. Because if the trend is that Nigerians are going to
how will it happen without any notice, prior notice whatsoever? They just announce a closure of the border, and then these people find themselves in this very unfortunate circumstance. How does that happen if the flagship protocol on free movement of persons and the right of residence establishment of ECOWAS, which allows for citizens to stay for a maximum of 90 days on a visit to a member country, is still in force? I'm getting, suggestions that it may have been abolished. Otherwise, how could Nigeria have done this? And they are hosting ECOWAS. Really.
This is where the point I'm making is a very pragmatic one. I'm saying that this duration has never happened. It used to be sporadic. It's, I think GUTA just confirmed, yes, an intermittent. But I'm saying, if this is going to be the trend, whether as a result of retaliation for what is happening, in Kumasi and other places or whatever, then I'm saying we might as well have a certain rapid response team, to alleviate the sort of difficulties in the event that it should occur again. And maybe such a team can also be there to respond to things that would happen at the port and other, to remove bottlenecks. I'm not talking about the, a permanent, but maybe some ad hoc, team that can be put together. So I'm coming from a very pragmatic. It is a matter of, I agree with you, and you are the lawyer, it's a matter of respecting protocols. But that's why I began with, free trade areas. At the moment, the whole globe is looking at a recession that may be caused by two big, powers, fighting with each other in terms of trade. U.S., and China, and it could have ramifications, and we will feel the impact, because if it hits global demand, it's going to hit demand for our commodities, as has happened, umpteen times.
Okay, so Kweku, I don't know if you have some rare insight in this area, particularly about the 90-day stay maximum, stay for member countries and their, traders visiting each country. Because as far back as, 2013, there had been calls for that particular protocol to be abolished. And I suspect it may have been abolished, but we are not aware, and the traders too are not aware. That's why they are caught up. Otherwise, otherwise, Nigeria should be the least to attempt to not respect the protocol.
Well, you're right. I mean, to put it in plain language, what Nigeria is doing offends all the principles of ECOWAS.
Okay.
What Nigeria is doing offends all the principles of ECOWAS. And maybe we shouldn't be too surprised. If you look at Nigeria's attitude within the workings of ECOWAS, this will not be surprising. But before I comment further on that,
have we been this blunt to them as we meet them over the period, or because now, like they say, we have our hands in their mouth, so you can't hit their head?
Oh, well, I've attended a few ECOWAS meetings, and of course, where a country's posture on a particular issue suggests what I'm talking about. You pointed out at the meeting that this position is untenable. So pointing it out to them, of course, you will, and I'm sure they hear these discussions. There have been times when other countries have also postured in a similarly, if you like, unlawful ways. But Nigeria is particularly, or has more often than the others come under this kind of criticism. And so in a sense, it's not surprising. But, you know, I sincerely think that it is untenable. This posture is untenable in the light of the Africa Free Trade arrangements. Where we're going, it's going to come to a time where it just will not be beneficial for a country within, say, Africa, if AFTA works as has been arranged. It's going to be very difficult for a single country to do this, because then others would retaliate. There would be consequences for you. So this kind of posturing, in my respectful view, ultimately would be unsustainable. But in respect of the Ghana case, the second delegation, a ministerial delegation made up of the deputy ministers of trade and foreign affairs, actually returned on Thursday.
Okay.
Now, there has been some understanding between Ghana and Nigeria that the Ghanaians stuck at the border will be given some access to cross on either side. That is the feedback they brought. Okay. And that on Monday, there would be communication to this effect, because I think there's going to be a meeting at which this decision perhaps would be ratified or confirmed. And then the Ghanaians at the border on either side would be given some special passage. Okay. And then, because we don't know how long this is going to last, there's also a discussion that a special arrangement ought to happen that would cater for Ghanaians. And this is coming on the back of the suggestion by Nigeria that you are not our target. I don't quite agree with Nigeria that this is targeted at crime and not targeted at countries. Essentially, when you close your border, you close it to countries, you know. So I'm not too sure what they're saying in that regard is right. But at least for the Ghanaian case, these are the things that government has been pursuing to ensure that some relief is brought. But in the broader scheme of things, I think as a country, we need to really look at our own role within ECOWAS, our own participation within ECOWAS, and also the broader Africa Free Trade Area discussions. The provisions in the GIPC Act would have to be harmonized, in my respectful view, with the principles of both AFTA and ECOWAS. And unless we did that, you're always going to have this situation where, as Kweku mentioned, you could tackle the Nigerians here. Before you do that, you ought to think carefully about possible reciprocal responses against your own citizens in other countries. That may well explain why sometimes governments, not just this government, but previous governments, have been very reluctant to perhaps apply those provisions as strictly and as strongly as we can. I mean, I have had several engagements with Guta, and at some point I have even promised them that I'm happy to lead a campaign that would uproot foreigners in retail trade that act unlawfully. But I guess government, if it's minded to do so, we need to pay attention to our own commitments to both ECOWAS and also to Africa. And
how do we know how much is this hurting, you know, the Ghanaian business, more particularly the Ghanaian business? We know, for example, on the side of Benin, the World Bank estimates that this Benin's economy relies heavily on the informal re-export and transit trade with Nigeria, and that accounts for about 20% of its GDP or national income. What's the situation for us? Because we know there are hundreds of trucks that may be, you know, stranded, but what does that translate to? And we just also are aware of this Casapreco example of losing almost $2 million, you know, dollars within this short period from August to now.
Yeah, I do not have the hard figures here, and I did not ask for them before coming for this program. But it is sufficient to look at the concerns that have been raised by Guta and also the Casapreco case you mentioned to tell you why the president, for instance, acted the way he did. Obviously, there are Ghanaians locked up in this, and therefore, whilst it would be good to look at the figures, I think the case is made that Ghana ought to pay attention to what is happening, both in the short term, and that is engaging with Nigerians to ensure that the interests of the Ghanaians on both sides of the border are protected. But perhaps more importantly, what kind of arrangement can we enter into with Nigeria so that beyond those locked there, crossing the border, something else will be done to encourage Ghanaians who have been trading along that route? Because if I got locked up once and by the intervention of my government, I get away with it and it's open for me under some special circumstances, I'm definitely going to wonder how going forward would be like. So not only do we have to do this, but I think the discussions that are ongoing between the relevant ministries of both countries in respect of an arrangement that allows Ghanaians, if Nigeria is going to continue doing this, that allows Ghanaians should happen, whilst we think about our own position in the broader ECOWAS and AFTA arrangements.
Okay. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, we'll conclude the discussion on this subject matter, and I'll ask questions including what Dr. Charles Rekubrobe is asking. He says, if we are still trying after 35 years of ECOWAS, we might as well pack in AFTA, the Africa Free Continental Trade thing, at the starting blocks. We might as well pack it at the starting blocks. We'll take a quick break, and I'll return. I'll ask this, including other questions, whether or not we, in these kind of circumstances, African leaders, are we really ready to get together as one unit? Russia invites us, and we go there. We go there with individual, as it were, demands, begging for whatever. And we have as a group, as a collective, we have such a huge economy. We are dealing with how much of a population that we're going to trade, and we go to them as if we are begging. Meanwhile, we shouldn't be begging. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Now, a couple of your comments, and then we'll wrap up on this discussion with the issue in Nigeria. And Michael Abbey, to the first issue, says, Kweku seem not to get it. The need for targeting for the free SHS program is critical for fiscal sustainability for its effective operationalization. I don't seem to understand his position on discrimination when the targeting is implemented. He must also know by now that the system is already discriminatory. If it's a heritage for the Ghanaian child, why can't it be extended as well to all Ghanaian children, including those in private senior high schools? Let's have a holistic analysis of this situation, looking at the advice from ISA. And this from YK and Sayabwa, he says, even a capitalist society like the US that loves money than human beings, basic education to high school is free and compulsory. All children in the United States have access to free public schools. So I am not sure where Dr. Rekubrobe got his information from to allude that nowhere in the world is secondary education free. Okay, thanks for your message. Eja Adam says Nigeria has the competitive advantage due to its huge market size and may not feel the biting effects. Ghana stands to lose in the end, while we plead with GUTA to restrain its members from undertaking any actions which contravene the laws of the land. The Foreign Affairs and Trade and Industry Ministries should speed up their efforts in getting these borders reopened. Okay, thanks for those views that you share. For those of you sounding quite violent with your comments about what the Nigerians are doing, I'm sorry, but I can't be a conveyor belt for those kind of comments. Kolog Jonathan Yin says he wants to know from the Deputy Minister whether it is wrong to limit the free SHS to students from public junior high schools alone who are moving to SHS, because if your parents can pay for your fees at private schools, then they should be in good standing to do the same at the SHS level. Okay, thanks for that. Balasi Zola Emmanuel says, I totally agree with Ise' report on NAPCO. Why? Because all the graduates who are doing NAPCO went through national service and have got some experience and small capital to set them up for new job or business. One way or the other, they couldn't utilize it. After their exits in NAPCO, same will happen. The fund being used can be used to create permanent jobs for them. Thank you for those messages. And take a final one from A.U. Farouk in Tamale. He says, if government is not spending, how can the economy be stable? Government must start putting better policies to stabilize the economy. Thank you for those comments. Right. So let me now return to Cletus Boateng and find out, Clement Boateng, and find out from you, what are the expectations of GUTA and its members immediately about what should happen because of the disturbing situation now?
Yeah, Samson, thank you. Before I come to your question, I want to respond to one issue that Honorable Kwaku Boateng raised regarding reprisal, attacks on our brothers who might also be doing some businesses in Nigeria. What GUTA has been saying is that if there's any Ghanaian in Nigeria who is doing an illegitimate business in Nigeria, it is incumbent on the Nigerian government to deal with that person. Recently, just about a month thereabout.
So you should also need the government to deal with those who may be doing something.
How long? How long? This thing has come about close to 20 years now since we started this fight. Successive governments have not had the courage to implement or enforce the law. Why? So we cannot wait.
So you will be law enforcers by yourselves?
We can do that in the form of citizens' arrest. It is something. You are my big brother. You are a lawyer. We have the right to do that, to do the citizens' arrest. And our president has said we should be citizens, but we shouldn't be spectators. So if authorities who are supposed to enforce the law are not doing it, and citizens and foreigners are flouting our laws with impunity, we have every right to go by that means.
To go and do what? Arrest them?
Yes, to arrest them.
But is that what you've been doing? You're closing their shops.
We close their shops.
That's not arrest.
It is not arrest.
You need a court order to be able to close somebody's shop.
But if those people that are being paid by taxpayers' money are not doing their job, what do you expect us to do? We are losing businesses. We are losing our livelihood. How can we continue to be in this situation?
Some say you are not competitive and you are blaming it on the Nigerians who are finding very innovative ways of attracting business.
It is never true. It is never true, because coming from Nigeria, coming from China, coming from Lebanon or something, at an interest rate of maybe 4%, I cannot be competitive with that person, because I'm paying, even I don't know, be in this government that currently we are even paying 25, 26%. How can we compete with them? So right from the word go, the playing field is not leveled. Yes.
So what do you
if
want
we are
to
talking
happen?
about
What do you want to
issues,
happen immediately?
What we want to, you see, what the Nigerians are doing is just putting bureaucratic means, because when the first delegation of the foreign minister and the trade minister went there, they said they were going to try as much as possible to open a corridor for us so that goods that are locked up there will be passage for those goods.
That's what they are saying, that you are likely to get some announcement by Monday.
That's what they are saying, and, and they said they are going to work out some modalities. How long are they going to work out that modalities? Just recently, the deputy minister and the deputy foreign minister returned. They just returned this Thursday, and according to them, they said they have finished with that modalities and have sent it to the Nigerian authorities. So how long is it going to take them to open that passage for us? Whilst people goods are, going bad. People have taken loans from banks and they are supposed to repay.
Some of the goods are perishable.
They're perishable, yes. I saw on TV about 2 weeks ago about 10 loads of coconut, which have all gone bad.
Oh,
yes, which have all gone bad. You see, so how long can we continue to be in this situation? They are just putting just bureaucratic measures in the way just to do whatever suits them, because their head of customs had made it plain that what Nigeria is doing is to protect its economy and its citizens, irrespective of ECOWAS protocol. Damn with ECOWAS protocol. That's what he said. So I don't see the reason why our authorities here cannot also do same regarding the GIPC Act. We are not saying we are driving away foreigners. That is not what we are saying. What we are saying is just enforcement of the law.
Okay. So it's good news to you that by Monday something should happen.
If that is what is going to happen, then we appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So I think I sympathize with Guta in many ways. And the call on government to apply the laws as they are is a legitimate one. But if we're looking for durable solutions, we need to invest energies in seeking them. If today, or say next week, the GIPC Act was amended and those provisions removed, then suddenly we're satisfied and we're going to allow them to do trade here as usual. So I'm just trying to make the point that the matters involved go beyond just law. If Nigeria closes its border in a way that hurts Ghanaian traders, and what we want to do in response is just to apply the GIPC Act, it may be completely insufficient. It may be insufficient. And
Kweku suggested, and what he said was re-echoing what some experts have said. Do we have a problem that what we have in the GIPC may not be realistic? Do we want to realign that?
Yeah, I think I made some. Yes, as I said, I've been working with Guta for a long time, and my own position on this, I'm beginning to rethink, because you see, I'll conclude shortly. If we were to go all out that way and stop foreigners from indulging in retail, the question we ought to ask is, does that address the wider discussion about we trading freely among ourselves, creating the bigger markets? Those are the big, more important
we have run out
issues.
of time. I'm sorry. Mr. Tekwa, if you have some 30 seconds of a comment to make about how to bring relief quickly.
The first part was addressed by Kweku. That there's a trend. ECOWAS, now Continental Free Trade Area is coming. And I think that this is a context in which both the nation and Guta should see, what is happening. The other one is, and in my experience, Kweku, I have been associated with Guta and VAT.
Okay.
Yeah. And the VAT flat rate scheme has been on and off. I think Guta has to also appreciate that they can affect government policy, which is always not, to, at the moment it's leading to high prices. And
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And this is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Newsfile. It's been an economic file. My guest, Abdul Malik Kekubako.
Next time, make sure you don't include me.
You will still be here. You will still be here. Abdul Malik Kekubako, editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Clement Boateng is national organizer of GUTA. Kweku Kwating is MP of Boase West and Deputy Minister of Finance. Mr. Seth Tekwe is former finance minister, and earlier you heard also Dr. Ebo Texin, senior lecturer, Department of Economics at the University of Ghana. This is where we end it. I'm Samson Ladia Yenini, my outfit, not by Latida. You see me in Latida next week, but this is from Yankpala University, UDS in Tamale. Have a good afternoon.